Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to topic 8. In this topic, we're going to be seeing how the drop shadow works. Basically, not just drop shadow, but how the shadows work in general. So we have two types of shadows. Take one. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to topic 8. In this topic, we're going to be seeing how the shadows work in Photoshop. We have two types of shadows in Photoshop. We have the inner shadow as well as the drop shadow. And both of these provide shadows but in very different ways. So let's see how these work now. So for explain to you guys the shadows, we're gonna take this parking area over here, alright? And now we're gonna see how the shadows work in the parking area, and that's gonna literally be the way it works in all the areas as well. So I'll just go up to this parking area and I'll double click on the layer to actually activate the layer style, and we have now understood how the pattern overlay works. So let's see how the drop shadow as well as the inner shadow work. Now the drop shadow, as the name suggests, is actually going to drop a shadow off this object. So when I click on drop shadow, you'll see that we have the drop shadow written over here. We have the blend mode, the opacity, the angles, the distance, the size, and we have the quality. So let's see what these actually mean. When we increase the distance over here, you'll actually see a shadow popping out from here. And the shadow is basically in this color because the black color is selected here, and the opacity is at 75%. If you reduce the opacity, it will become lighter, and if you increase the opacity, it will become darker. So we can obviously adjust that according to the way we want our shadow to be. And you have to understand that basically this entire area, which is that this entire object, which is actually providing a shadow which is not even on the object, it is off the object. As you guys can see over here, it is actually off the object completely. So I'll just bring this on this side. We can see that how the distance actually is making it move away. Then we have got the angle, and if we kind of change this angle slightly, guys, you guys will notice how the shadow is moving all around the object, and that's basically the angle of the placement of the shadow, right? And we have something called as use global light here, which I'll be coming to later, but let's just see what the spread as well as the size do. So you can see over here, if I increase the spread, there's not much of a change in the shadow, but it starts to get a little bit more very rigid. As you can see over here, it's very rigid. And if I decrease this, you can see how that actually just changes, right? So the rigidity of the shadow increases through the spread, and when we talk about the size, it's basically how diffused the shadow is going to be, as you can see, right? So a lot of things can vary on when changing these distance, the speed, the spread, the size, and the angle, as well as the opacity, guys. But this is all from the drop shadow. What is the inner shadow about then? If the drop shadow is off the object, well, then the inner shadow is on the object. So I'm going to leave the drop shadow on so you understand drop shadow is off the object. And when I switch on the inner shadow, you can see if I increase this distance, we actually have the shadow now falling on the object itself, as you guys can see. And I can actually change this angle. But if you see, when I'm changing the angle, both the shadows have an angle changing together. And why is that happening? Well, that is happening because we have the global light switched on. So if I switch off the global light, as you guys can see, and now if I change it, it's only the inner shadow that is being affected. And this would matter for n different number of layers. So let's say we have multiple different layers, and 5 of them have the drop shadow on, and 5 of them have the inner shadow on. And out of all these 10 layers, so let's say 2 of them have their global light switched off and 8 of them have their global light switched on. Wherever the global light is switched on, all of them will move their angles together. And that's basically what global light means. But I'll be doing that as well so you guys get an understanding when we're talking about different layers. Over here you can see the shadows basically coming on the object. That's why it's called inner shadow. And drop shadow is basically because it's going off the object. That's why it's called dropping off. So drop off or drop shadow. That's basically the difference between an inner shadow and a drop shadow. So I can just close this, guys, and not set any shadow at the moment. Let's talk about where do we use drop and where do we use inner. Well, inner shadows are used in spaces which need to have the shadow on the floor. That's right, any place with a floor like this parking or these floors or these toilets, all of these will have inner shadow. They will not be dropping anywhere. And the walls will never have inner shadow or drop shadow because the walls are very slender, right? So we just want to replicate the shadow of them on the floor, which we will be doing through the inner shadow. So I can just double click on the bedroom right now and provide an inner shadow. And as you can see, I'm leaving the global light switched on so that you guys get an explanation of what global light is in a little bit more defined way. So I can just kind of change the angle. Let's say I change it from this side. Yeah, this is fine. As you guys can see, this is actually replicating the shadow of the walls itself, which will be falling on the floor. Now I can actually go ahead and copy the layer style from here and I can paste it in the hall. So we'll have the shadow over here as well. But if I go ahead and I try pasting it in the toilet, what will happen is even the material will change because the material comes under layer style. So I will not be doing it in this way. I'll just enter into this and I'll have to give it a separate inner shadow, guys. And you can see I'll just increase the distance. I can actually switch off the global light over here. And the reason why I'll be switching off the global light is because the hall as well as the bedroom have global light switched on. And if the toilet has global light switched on as well, then all the angles will move together. But I don't want them to move together. I want them to move separately, so I can switch off the global light just so that I can change the angle of my toilet like this. And I can just increase this and increase the size as well. So we have just a little dark shadow over here, something like that. So now you guys must have understood why global light is necessary and what it basically does. Now when we talk about the deck over here or the side steps, when we say the topmost layer is S4, we can go ahead now and give this a drop shadow. We don't want to give it an inner shadow, so we'll be giving it a drop shadow. And why a drop shadow? Because this shadow is basically going to fall on the below step as well as on the ground. And we can switch off the global light, otherwise they all would react in the same way as the living room as well as the bedroom. So I can just easily increase this, change the angle, reduce the opacity slightly, guys, and kind of increase the size as well over here. So you guys can see how that's actually created, and I can just copy this layer style because it has the same material as well as we have the same shadows that we want to drop. I can select it in all of these layers and just kind of quickly paste it over here. So this is how we'll have the shadow, and you can see this shadow is created only because we have all of them on a different layer. And this is where it's going to help us to actually create a more detailed rendering of the entire drawing. Once I'm done with this, guys, I can even give this a drop shadow, switch off the global light so we can see where the shadow is coming. Just change the angle, increase the size. Can just go ahead and decrease this distance. And press OK. Just copy the layer style from here. And just quickly paste this over here, something like that. Similarly, I will do it for the back steps. I'll give a drop shadow, size, copy the layer style, and I can just paste it out of here. Now once we're done with all of these, we'd even want to give the parking an inner shadow. Because we got the wall from here, so we have to understand also where we are trying to give the shadow. Because we have a wall over here, that's why the shadow would be better to fall from here. Now I'm talking about these steps, guys. As you can see, the shadows over here will fall like this, but when we talk from the mid landing and below, the shadows need to fall in the other way. So we can easily select the top layer over here, and I'll just see which is the below layer. So now I want to see which is this step, correct? And it's difficult to find, as well as they all are inside one group itself. So what you can do is just come on this layer and right click, and it will show you inside steps, and below that it will show you which layer it's on, which is the layer 14, and you can see that's the correct layer. So I'll enter first into the layer 27 and kind of give it a drop shadow, switch off the global light, increase the distance slightly, and I can just change the angle so that it's coming out in the front like this. We can reduce the distance and increase the size, just something like that. And we can even reduce the opacity just slightly, and I can press OK. I can copy now this layer style and select from 26 all the way to 15 and just paste this. So as you guys can see, we have all of these shadows falling downwards. And when we're talking about the mid landing and below, that's layer 14 and below, I can select again drop shadow, switch off the global light this time, increase the distance, change the angle slightly, and decrease the distance slightly a little bit more, increase the size, right? And we can just reduce the opacity, something like this. I press OK, copy the layer style, select all the layers to layer 9 and paste it. So we have these dropped like this. So this is actually going to give so much more depth to our entire drawing, guys. And do remember Alt and scroll in, so you can scroll in, and then once you're in, you can press Control and scroll to go side by side. You can also press spacebar and scroll up and down. So that's basically how it's going to help you guys. And when you're actually pressing spacebar, you can actually move around like this. So that's why spacebar is also very important. So if you press spacebar and then use the left click, you can actually pan everywhere like this. If you use control, you can scroll right to right. Otherwise, you can just scroll up and down, and Alt to scroll outside. So that's basically how you guys will see, and you guys can see how much depth has been created to this. Well guys, we're done with this much for this topic. In the next topic, we'll be seeing how to add AutoCAD furniture as well as furniture from outside from the internet in our plans. We'll see that in the next topic. I'll catch you there. Take care.